Maybe someone changes throughout their lives. That's also a possibility. I mean, who hasn't, at least on a few aspects?
Some say that he was generous and kind, and others say that he was cruel and draconian. I also love that the dichotomy of his character is reflected whenever he introduces himself in Civilization 7. When he meets another leader, he says, "I am Octavian, Augustus Caesar, a simple first citizen, and emperor of the world."
That's actually pretty nice. The voice actor who does speak Latin is clearly from Italy. I can tell the accent, and unfortunately pronounces what was supposed to be classical Latin with a very modern pronunciation. In fact, I think it's almost ecclesiastical. I'll have to double check it again, but even if it's not ecclesiastical, you can tell the person has a thick modern Italian accent and did not have any training in classical Latin pronunciation of the 1st century AD, which is very specific and has been reconstructed quite accurately.
But he says it in Latin, and I love that the game designers even paid such close attention to detail so that his pronunciation of Latin is not that of ecclesiastical Latin, church Latin of later years, but of the classical Latin spoken in 1st century BC Rome, which would be with a hard C. So instead of Caesar, he pronounces it
Augustus Caesar.
And attention to detail is, precisely according to Suetonius himself, why he includes a whole section in his biography of Augustus.
Yeah, okay, I have to disagree with you there. So, sure, it's not, I mean, I don't know if it's because you're sponsored so you can't say it. I don't know, maybe it's not. I like Max, but I disagree with you. His accent, yeah, he's not pronouncing it in ecclesiastical Latin, you are correct. But this voice actor, who is clearly Italian, I can recognize the accent being Italian, has had zero training in classical Latin. Zero, nothing. You can tell he has a very thick modern Italian accent whenever he pronounces classical Latin. So yes, he's attempting. They told him, do the hard C, do the V as a W. Great, but that's not enough. You need someone who is actually trained in classical Latin and doesn't, for example, do the fully pronounced M's and N's at the end of words, whereby the voice actor absolutely does, which makes him sound modern Italian. He doesn't nasalize the M's. He has no idea when it comes to phonemic vowel length whatsoever. He just puts the stress like a modern Italian would. Once again, I would know. So no, I did not like their choice of voice actor one bit. Maybe he's a good Italian voice actor, but he hasn't got a clue how to pronounce classical Latin, and that's just how it is.
On the emperor's dining habits and entertaining habits, he starts off by talking about a particular dinner, an opulent dinner that Augustus threw, called the Dinner of the 12 Gods. And it was a private affair, but word got out, and the public, when they heard about this dinner, were aghast. It caused quite the stir. Essentially, all the guests showed up dressed as gods and goddesses. Augustus was dressed as Apollo. And so when people...
Actually, I can see that. I can see him dressed as Apollo. That's pretty nice.
...heard about this, they thought it was sacrilegious. Apollo's part was lewdly played by impious Caesar. He made merry at a table laid for gross debauchery. It was said that the gods themselves were even so upset that they turned their faces from the earth, and Jupiter himself, his thunder mocked, fled from his golden throne. It didn't help that this banquet took place during a period when the people of Rome and its surrounding areas were going through a famine, so it led people the next day to shout cries in the streets of the gods have gobbled all the grain, and Caesar is Apollo, true, but he's Apollo of the torments.
Wow. Man, I love what he fished out, what he found and shared. It's really cool.
Suetonius pairs this with another criticism of the emperor, saying that he had a particular fondness for bronze Corinthian statues. So much so that it led him to maybe do some unscrupulous things around the prescriptions. The prescriptions were lists of Roman citizens who were declared outlaws, and there was one particular prescription that was put out during the time of the Second Triumvirate, the one of Mark Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian, the future Augustus. Well, when your name was put onto this list, not only were you declared outlawed, but all of your possessions were forfeit. And some people's names were put on the list, supposedly by Augustus, Octavian, who in their possessions had a large amount of Corinthian bronze statues, which
I do find Corinthian bronze statues particularly beautiful. Not that I'm justifying necessarily Emperor Augustus' actions here. I mean, yeah, he's being a muppet in this case. But what would I do to have a bronze Corinthian statue? I would put it here, Max. I don't know where you would put it, but I would put it right here. So when I'm filming the videos, you can see the statue looking at you.
Which, once they were confiscated, found their way into the collection of Augustus, who liked collecting things. One of the most interesting things, I think, was that he liked collecting dinosaur bones. Though Suetonius says, at Caprae he collected the monstrous skeletons of extinct sea and land monsters, called the bones of giants.
Wow.
But while Suetonius includes all these criticisms in his biography,
why is that a criticism? It's awesome.
he also says that Augustus easily disproved all of them. They were slanderous. And one way that he disproved his love of opulence and luxury was that when in Egypt, he went to the palace of the Ptolemies and didn't take any of the fine furniture. All he took was a single cup of agate. So that disproves that he liked fine things. Case closed. Though Suetonius does say that there were two criticisms of Augustus that even he could not refute. One was promiscuous lustfulness, even after marriage, and the other was he loved gambling. Suetonius says that not only did he gamble during Saturnalia, when it was allowed, but pretty much on every other day of the year as well.
Well, imagine if you are the emperor, you probably feel you're above the law, because in a way, in theory, you're not. But in practice, I mean, as long as you can make sure that your enemies don't behead you, you effectively are above the law. Effectively, again, I understand, I know what you're going to type, yes, but the Roman legal, I know, I'm just saying, for all intents and purposes, they can find ways around, as you can see. This is really, really cool, by the way. I like this presentation very much.
Mostly during meals, something which he himself freely admitted. Augustus wrote, "My dear Tiberius, we dined with the same company, and we gambled like old men throughout the meal, both yesterday and today. And over the course of 5 days of this mealtime gambling, I lost 20,000 sesterces. Though that was because, as usual, I displayed excessive sportsmanship. But that is how I like it. My generosity will win me immortal glory, to be sure." And he's humble, too. Actually, he was supposedly quite generous, at least if it meant that he could keep gambling. Whenever he would throw a dinner party, he would give each guest 250 denarii just so they could gamble with that money while they ate, kind of like seed money. So that must have cost him quite a bit, because he did throw a lot of parties. Though his parties were only for the elite.
I'd love to go. Shall we go, Max, to Augustus' party one of these nights? I think it'd be fun.
He was, it sounds like, kind of snobbish and paid particular attention to the level of a person in society when inviting different people to dinner and when seating them at the table.
I agree, but I wouldn't say that would be indicative on anything that it would be out of place in classical antiquity, nor even the medieval period for that. I mean, in medieval period, church authorities, but still authorities though. But in classical antiquity, I mean, it's not like the emperor is going to invite a couple of people from the streets just, oh, that's a nice one. Yeah, I like this one. This is actually a really nice, because we can see the muscolata. Look at this. So he's wearing a muscolata, clearly an officer, upper officer in fact. But there are a few other images like this from, I believe, the same extant example, where we actually see evidence of the half-length muscolata, because there were two types, which I think would have been used more commonly.
Valerius Messala writes that Augustus never invited a freedman to dinner, with the exception of Menas, and then only when he was to be honored for having betrayed the fleet of Sextus Pompey and delivered it into Augustus's power.
Pompey's omnipresent, noble ones. Pompey is always here. For you, for me, for everyone. Glory to Pompey.
And these dinner parties, with their highfalutin guest lists, were quite nice, but Augustus, who wanted to make sure that people saw him as generous, yet not ostentatious, made sure that the dinner consisted of 3 courses or of 6 when he was at his most lavish. There was no needless extravagance, but a most cheerful atmosphere. He was known for his ability to draw guests who were silent or chatted under their breath into the general conversation.
What a politician.
He also enlivened the meal with musicians and actors, or even strolling performers from the circus, though the most common were professional storytellers. Which is why, in Civilization VII, Augustus is an excellent choice for both a military expansion as well as a cultural victory. It's those storytellers. Though Augustus himself probably missed out very often on the professional storytellers because he was said to usually arrive late and leave early. Always
standard Italian.
leave them wanting more. Or at least make them think that you're just too busy on matters of state to enjoy all 6 courses. And while 6 courses may sound like a lot to us, it was nothing for the feast of a Roman emperor. Vitellius, who I did a video on a few years back, was said to have dozens of courses at each meal.
You can tell, honestly. I mean, Vitellius, no disrespect, but you can tell.
Each one costing more than the last. But that's not to say that Augustus was cheap. Like I said, he enjoyed being generous, especially during festivals. He would often give gifts to his guests at the dinner parties during times like Saturnalia. And sometimes these gifts could be expensive clothes or even gold and silver coins, though sometimes they could be haircloth, sponges, pokers, and tongs, and other such things under misleading names of double meaning. One example of this would be like he would have 2 gifts and give them to 2 different people, saying that both had to do with a dinner party. And one person would open theirs and it would be a new toga or a dress meant to wear to a dinner party. The other person opens theirs and it's a piece of raw steak. Romans thought this kind of thing was hilarious. I got you a gift, but it sucks. Isn't that funny? Though, I guess it's not that far off from the modern day white elephant party. So, ancient Romans, they're just like us. But further, I think that the gambling...
I really like his premises and how he addresses that, like how ancient people were as complex as we are,